Hey guys, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Want to start out by talking about a relationship, okay? And there's a couple of reasons I want to talk about this. One, the knife that I have for you today is the Spyderco Yojimbo, and it is an example of what I'm talking about. But before I start showing you the knife, I want to point out that there is a relationship that exists between weapons and tools, okay? From the very first time that someone tied a rock to a stick to use as a hammer, they would have realized, hey, I could use this as a weapon. And maybe it was first done to be a weapon and then they realized they could use it as a hammer. Who knows? All I'm saying is there is an ongoing relationship, a back and forth between weapons and tools, okay? And in fact, I think there was a show, it's probably not still on the air, but there was a show called From Tactical to Practical, where there are all kinds of military things that were developed that turned out to have a great civilian use as well, and vice versa. Okay, so the main thing that I want to say is that whether something is a weapon or a tool depends on who's using it and what they're using it for. And that includes practically anything you could think of, from a car to a gun to a sledgehammer, okay? It's not fair to say this is designed to be a weapon, therefore we should restrict it or something like that. You know, nuclear power is a perfect example. Is it a tool? Is it a weapon? Well, the reality is it's both. It depends on how you use it. And the same is true of a knife, okay? Now, what's cool about this knife is that it's clearly heavily influenced by tools, okay? This looks like a large utility knife. However, it's designed by Michael Janich to be a weapon. So, is it a weapon? Is it a tool? Well, the reality is it's both. It's an extremely effective utility tool. It's a great everyday carry knife that you can have with you all the time wherever you go for cutting tasks. It does exceptionally well at cutting tasks. Now, on the other hand, if you are trained well and if you know how to use it, it could also be a weapon, especially, of course, this particular design kind of lends itself to this style of edged weapon combat that Michael Janich uses and advocates, which means if you're trained along those lines, this would be a very attractive weapon as well. You know, maybe your style is more like what Lacey Szabo does, and so the Szabo would be more attractive to you, okay? So that's why I said all that, because although this is designed by Michael Janich, who's an edged weapons expert, it's extremely utilitarian in its design, and even I would suggest in its inspiration. All right, so that's where I want to start off. Let's go ahead now and talk about size and weight. I do have a couple comparisons for you. This is a very, very nice size for EDC, 7 3/4 inches, 3 1/4 inch blade with a 3-inch cutting edge, and a 4.5 inch handle. Now, I did see a couple websites list this knife as 7.5 inches, which is a quarter of an inch shorter. So I went back and measured again. I was like, did I get it wrong? But no, it's definitely 7 3/4. Okay. Couple size comparisons for you. Here is an obvious comparison, the Paramilitary 2, about 1/2 inch longer. Okay. Both of these have the compression lock, very, very similar in size and weight, and even in the way they function. To give you a larger option, there is a Spyderco Military, and again, you can see the Military dwarfs the Yojimbo. It also kind of dwarfs the Paramilitary, Paramilitary 2, I should say. But that gives you, those are a couple comparisons, so you have a sense for what sizes. So they'll show you the Para 2 again, just because they're very close. All right, and cutting edge is even closer. Now, let's move on. We move past size and weight. Oh yeah, 4 ounces. I'm not sure if I mentioned that it's 4 ounces in weight or not. But again, all of those numbers are very, very in keeping with the kind of numbers we look for in an everyday carry blade. Okay. Now let's move in a little bit so you can see some of what I'm talking about when I get into some of the more specific stuff. First is the blade. We always talk about the blade first. This is of course a Wharncliffe style blade. Very, very deep hollow grind, extremely thin behind the edge, extremely sharp point. Now, it is also a very fine point, which means you're going to have to, here's one of the limitations, this is not a hard use knife, in the sense that, I mean, you could use it pretty hard if you're cutting back here and really pushing through material, that's fine. But this tip is very, very fine. You could break this off quite easily. In fact, if you are flipping this knife, you've got it open and you drop it, there's a really good chance you're going to damage that tip, okay? So just be aware of that. Otherwise, the edge is phenomenal. Now, I have used this. I've never been a big fan of Wharncliffe style blades, but this knife and the Brose Blade Silent Soldier have really influenced me, and I've really started liking that. So I may even look into picking up, you know, one of the popular mid-techs. There's the Iron Horse Forge. I think it's called the Chopper. There's also the ADV Butcher, which are really popular right now. And I may actually pick one of those up just because a few of the other, you know, this knife and especially the Silent Soldier have really made me start to appreciate that Wharncliffe style blade shape. It is S30V blade steel. Of course, you've got the good old made in Colorado on Earth on the blade, and you have the MJ here standing for Michael Janich, who's the designer. All right. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? Oh yeah, one other important thing to say about this blade. Notice, because it's a Wharncliffe, there's no belly at all. So if you do the kind of cutting tasks, sorry, I had to move around a little bit there. If you do the kind of cutting tasks that require a belly, this is not going to be for you. Now, my experience has been that the Wharncliffe design has worked really, really well, okay? A couple of times there's been a minor issue, and I'll talk about one other issue when I get to the handle, but 90% of the time this blade has been totally fine for whatever I was doing. A belly is nice, and it does make this a little more versatile, but the Wharncliffe is just fine. All right, of course, Michael Janich believes that the Wharncliffe is also very good for a combat knife. Generally, we talk about wanting some belly in a combat style knife for slicing. Janich points out that with this style, you have more force to apply behind your cut, which is also good. Okay, so you know, I'm not going to have that debate right now, right here, but I think it would be totally functional in terms of blade shape as either a great utility knife, or, you know, if you're a cop or a soldier or something and you need a knife for self-defense, this could work for that role as well. What about lockup and deployment? Let's back out a little bit because I'll still keep it somewhat zoomed in, but I want you to see my hand while I deploy this. As you can see, very fast, very smooth, just like all of us love the paramilitary 2 for. That compression lock is extremely fun to flip and use. Now I will say the cutout in the handle for the compression lock is not quite as well done as the Para 2, and this will kind of pinch your fingers a bit from time to time. Not the end of the world, and even if it does happen, I have pinched myself a couple times, and it's not like a hard pinch where you're opening skin or leaving a red mark or anything like that. It's just, it just catches your finger a little bit once in a while, and even that is pretty rare. All right. Otherwise, very fast. It is phosphor bronze bushings rather than ball bearing pivot, which I know is like the darling of the knife world right now. You guys know my position on the ball bearings versus the washers. I mean, yeah, ball bearings versus washers. I generally, for an EDC knife, prefer washers, even though I will say it's not the end of the world. I have both. I like both. Just find this style of pivot to be a little more utilitarian, okay? Again, very well carried off, and by the way, we're used to that with Spydercos. How many people do you see talking about Spydercos that don't deploy well, that can't be spider flick? You know, rarely does that ever happen. So, of course, compression lock is very good. Phosphor bronze bushings, very good. Now, the handle is the next thing we want to talk about, and it looks really odd, okay? Let me show you this. You look at that handle and you go, who makes a knife handle that looks like that? The reality is, though, you get a hold of it and you're like, oh, well, whoever made it really thought about it a long time, because it works really well. It's extremely comfortable. You can get a really good grip on it. The traction is excellent, and it's great for cutting. Like, you can get a lot of work done like this very comfortably without a lot of fatigue or hot spots or anything like that. So the handle is really well done, even though it looks odd. Now, there is one little issue I have, and that is it could be offset a little more. I would almost prefer to see this blade moved down half an inch or something. And the reason for that is, notice where my fingers are. Let me get something that's got to reach. Sorry, I wasn't planning to do this, but I'm going to do it now. So here's a flat surface that I'm going to cut against. Look what happens. See how my fingers hit before the blade? So I'm only able to cut on a flat surface with the tip like this. which is fine, and I've done a lot of cutting. I suppose you could back out and do this kind of thing, and actually I have done that with some vegetables before, but it's not perfect, okay? Your fingers do get in the way a little bit if you're cutting on a flat surface. Otherwise, ergonomically, this is excellent. Pocket clip is reversible to all 4 positions. I'm just checking now because I got that wrong last time. It is reversible to all 4 positions. And in the tip-up position, it's actually quite high. So this knife rides pretty deep in pocket, which is really nice. Overall, let me back out here. Overall, this is just a really nice utilitarian blade shape. I've done, it does all of your EDC cutting tasks really, really well. You guys know how I feel about hollow grinds. I love hollow grinds. And so yeah, no major complaints about this other than, those minor nitpicks that I made, about the very fine tip and the less than perfect relationship between your hand and the blade coming in contact with whatever you're cutting. Now, when you're actually cutting, it's not really an issue because you just naturally cut more with the tip. So you do need to know this portion of the blade is what you're going to be using by far the most often. And of course, because it's quite thin out there, it cuts like crazy. I will say, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this will take an edge very well. The edge geometry is great, so I found I could get it really, really sharp, really, really easily. And S30V is going to hold that edge pretty well. Okay, so there you go, guys. That's my take on the Spyderco Yojimbo 2. Really great blade. In fact, and this should tell you how much I actually like this blade. I liked it enough, as I said before, that I'm now kind of leaning toward thinking about picking up another blade or two in that blade shape, especially some of those nicer mid-techs like the Iron Horse or the ADV Butcher. All right. There you go. That's my take on the Yojimbo 2. Great blade. I'm going to say this. If you're still watching, be looking for a video. I'm going to do a comparison between 3 knives. This one, the Para 2, and the Mannix, which I don't have here with me, because there's a lot of similarity between those 3 blades. They're all very similar price point, similar blade steel, just some minor differences between them. And so there's probably a number of people who've looked at all 3 and thought about which one should I buy or not buy. All right. So there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you next time.